Now I know why I'm here. It's in my blood. Well, the most important aspect of my life is trust. And all of a sudden she leaned over that bridge and she spat in the water.
Can the cow be the how?
Reducing methane reduces warming. Climate neutral farming is possible, and here's how.
We are in a dairy barn in UC Davis, the #1 rated agricultural land grant school in the world, in the country, I believe, and the #1 vet school. And I am sitting here with, I'm honored to be here. Frank Mitloehner, that is known as the gas guy, the greenhouse gas guru. But I think more importantly is as we see animal health and animals cross-section with the environment, that's who you are. As Temple Grandin is to animal well-being, you are to animals in the environment, right? So I want to get to know you. Tell me a little bit of how you got here.
How I got here to Davis?
Yeah.
Well, that's a long story. How much time?
Well, let's back up. Let's back up to where it all started.
So it all started with me wanting to be a psychiatrist.
Okay. A psychiatrist.
So I wanted to study medicine. But
and where was this?
That was back in Germany, in the old country.
All right.
Okay. So I just had finished my military service in the Luftwaffe, in the Air Force, and now wanted to be a psychiatrist. I applied to medical school, and guess what? They rejected me. And I was heartbroken because my girlfriend was accepted. And so I had to cure my broken heart by going on a trip with her, and we visited Southern Africa, where my brother had done his Ph.D. field training. And so there I saw all of these farms, ostrich, game ranches, beef cattle ranches, and so things I'd never seen before. And I loved it. I loved the exotic nature of it. I loved this animal agricultural.
Had you traveled much? Was this kind of one of your first, out of Germany? And
one of the first major ones. Okay.
And were you in a rural area of Germany, or was this kind of your first exposure to animal agriculture?
That was my first exposure to animal agriculture. Yeah. I was not at all a farm kid or so. Okay. Yeah. So, and then I really felt that was pivotal in my decision making, because when we then went back after these 3 months in Southern Africa, when we went back to Germany and I helped her do her paperwork at this new university where she was about to study medicine, I looked at other majors they had to offer there at this university, which was in East Germany, by the way. The wall had just come down. The Berlin Wall had just come down. We were the first West Germans to go to East Germany, okay? So I had dropped her off. I looked at major advising, and what did I find offered? Tropical, subtropical agriculture with a degree in agriculture engineering. And I thought, yeah, I can do that. And I enrolled. And then we went back
and
to
you got in that time.
Well, I got in, and then we went back home where we lived to pack up our stuff. And there was a letter in the mail from the admissions committee of the medical school. Dear Mr. Mitloehner, we are sorry to inform you that we erroneously rejected your application. And instead, we invite you to join our...
You're in now.
I was in. You know what I did?
So what was your choice?
You know what I did? I took that letter, I ripped it into pieces, threw it away, and studied agriculture. I never looked back. I thought...
So was that your moment? I always go, moments matter. Is that... I remember, as I told you, April 2000 in Brazil, seeing those hungry kids for the first time. People I knew that hadn't had a meal in 2 days, it made me say, I'm never going to act different. Animals and animal protein matters. Was it South Africa that made that happen, or was there?
It was Southern Africa, because from South Africa we traveled around there to Namibia, and then more importantly, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Malawi. Malawi is one of the 10 poorest countries in the world. And I saw what you're describing there from Brazil myself. People really suffering from hunger. And
but where was the connection to the animals?
The connection was that there were these animal farms. Because in many of those regions, you just cannot grow crops, or not enough. But you can have animals, livestock. And that's true for much of the world. So I thought I was the first person in animal agriculture in our family's history, but I found out that I was wrong. Because it was only my father's and grandfather's generation that was not in animal agriculture. 800 years prior to that, everybody was. And we found out exactly where I'm from. the mountains in a certain area of Germany where they had dairy cows. They made butter. They smuggled the butter across the mountains into a neighboring country. That was totally illegal, by the way. Okay, I'm not sure I should say that here, but it was. They literally smuggled it. And so for 800 years, they had cows on the first floor, people on the second floor. I had no idea of any of that, but now I know why I'm here. It's in my blood.
Wow. So what were the crucible? I mean, there's some moments that led you from the path you were on through your education to, everyone struggles when they get out. You have 400 students a year graduating from this school in animal science and under it. Tell me how you made the choice coming out of the university to do what? What was the journey to the path of the career around environment and animals?
So when I finished with an agricultural engineering degree in Germany, I first wanted to go to Australia. I was accepted. Then later they ran out of funding for PhD students, and so instead of going to Australia, I went to Texas, to Texas Tech University. Yeah. And there I found many opportunities to study things such as animal welfare in feedlot cattle. But I found that a more pressing need was environmental management, because some of those feedlots are very large, and there can be a substantial source, for example, of dust. Fugitive dust leaving those feedlots. And so I wanted to know, how is this environmental issue linked to animal welfare and animal health? Is it linked? Can this dust, for example, affect bovine respiratory disease or other issues?
When was this?
That was in... that was in 1997. About that time. And so I did my PhD there, studied the environmental footprint of livestock, and most importantly, means to reducing that environmental footprint. And I was one of the first people who really studied sustainability in animal agriculture. At that time, people in animal agriculture considered it a curse word. I never did. I always told farmers, look, do you have a problem with the term stewardship? And they said, no. So what does it mean to be a good steward? It means you take good care of your animals, of the land, of the natural resources, of the people who work with you, and of the product you produce and the financial resources. That all makes good stewardship. And that all makes sustainability. Stewardship, sustainability, to me, is much of the same.
Why has that word been taken so, it is the S word in agriculture. It's becoming a little more in vogue and a little more understood, but and it may be some of the challenge we still have today. We'll talk about the environmental change debate, but why has that happened, and how do we continue to influence that into much more of a word of understanding, a word of influence? Right now it's more of a word of controversy and confusion. Still is, 2 decades later.
You know that we live in a very divided society, right? Politically divided, but also many mindsets are divided. They say, well, they're more conservative, they're more liberal kind of mindsets. The ones who are more conservative, oftentimes these are farmers, feel that sustainability is kind of a liberal scheme, almost. But it's not. This is a concept that farmers should endorse. Because who, if not these farmers, knows about what that means? To take the best care of your animals' welfare and health, the best care of those natural resources that are needed, in an optimal way needed, to foster health and welfare, and so forth. The farmer is the one who needs to own this, not fear it.
That's good. It's back to we talked about this morning, is 140,000 farms lost in America the last 5 years. That's sustainability. Profitability. Farm profitability. I talked to farmers in your conference this morning, struggling right now with the cycles, right? So, getting a second check for carbon in addition to the check for milk is something that is, it's much more of a broader context than even just the environmental side. Is that?
Absolutely. To me, there are two sectors in society that are of vital importance to every society, and that's the health sector and the food sector. And while doctors and nurses are hailed as heroes, farmers are not. But we should ask ourselves why that is. because farmers are really producing what we all eat every day.
Yeah.
People associate a supermarket with the food they eat, but it's the farm that food came from. And so our farmers deserve that societal support. And where farming is not working very well right now, whether it's on the financial side or on other sides, we need to work to improve, but let's not throw that baby out of the bathtub.
Yeah. So maybe let's go, and I'll maybe pour us a glass of milk here, if that's all right.
Sure.
What it's all about is help me a little bit with the next generation. I mean, ultimately, it's about, I learned today, this is the #1 agricultural product in California. Yep. It's the #1 agricultural product in the world, dairy, milk. Yes. So my question to you, I guess, is think about the next generation. The Gen Zs, the younger than 25, how do we bring them along? Right now, that 12 to 26-year-old, half of them are saying, I'm choosing a different kind of milk, an almond milk, or we would call almond water, to cow's milk because of the environment. It's a real issue. And you are known as the leader of the world in terms of the voice on the environment, the animal, its connection to protein. So we've got to reach this next generation. How do we do that, Frank?
I am experiencing this generation as being very pragmatic and not dogmatic, okay?
Okay.
So I teach them here on campus, obviously. Cheers.
Cheers.
I teach them here on campus. Yeah. If you confront them with fact-based information that's packaged in a way they can understand, and that is not an easy thing to do, then you will get some very sharp questions. And you better not be afraid of answering those questions. And when you do, you will gain their trust and their support, and you can make some major impacts. I've seen it countless times with not hundreds, but with thousands of students. We have 1,600 students here in my department alone. So we're talking about a large number who you train over 22 years of your career.
So transparency, openness.
Yes.
I mean, what matters to them most right now?
What matters to them most is that we care. We care. And when I say we care, that we care for those animals, that we show that those animals on a farm are the most important asset, not just because they make money, but we care for them as individuals, as living beings, okay? That we care for the natural resources that are affected by a farm. That we are, when we think of sustainability, then we must think of the land being the host. And we are the guests. The land is the host, and we are the guests. I really like that, okay, because I think it's very powerful, because that's what it is.
It is.
That's what sustainability really means. I mean, we are here for a while, we hand it on to the next generation, and we want to hand it off at least as good as it was when we took over. And so the Generation Z and others, they want to see that we care, and that it's not some greenwashing.
Right.
That is really, really important. They don't want to just hear some PR or marketing. They are very, very much tuned into what is PR and what's not.
So maybe open the door, something I've not seen in any other university all over the world, what you've done with your team on CLEAR, the CLEAR Center. So inside the agricultural school at UC Davis is the CLEAR Center. What is the CLEAR Center? Because it's pretty revolutionary, I believe, because it's all part of this, right? It's the reaching of this next generation.
It is.
What is the CLEAR Center? And what it stands for?
It stands for Clarity and Leadership for Environmental Awareness and Research.
Okay.
So about 5 years ago, people came to me and said, Frank, we feel that you reach many people within agriculture, but there are so many people outside of agriculture who want to know more about sustainability, how we can improve it, how we can optimize agriculture production and so forth. And I talked to my dean about starting an institute of sorts that does two things. The first one is what we traditionally do, which is research, with postdoctoral fellows, with Ph.D. students and so on. But the other core of the CLEAR Center is communications. To put what I had done previously, which is effective science communication on steroids. Through having professionals hired that are proficient in taking the technical content that we deliver
Yeah.
through research and package it in ways people can understand.
And you said it's 50-50.
It's 50-50.
Research and communication.
Yes.
So go to the communication side. We all know the research drill, and that's critical. Yeah. What are you doing? I know you got a team. I met some of them, this afternoon.
Yeah.
What do they do?
So there are people trained as journalists, people trained as filmmakers, people trained as social media experts. These people are who you need in order to really visualize, for example, something that's difficult to grasp. For example, if you were to ask me, Frank, what's soil carbon sequestration? Now you explain that in 2 sentences, that makes sense. But if you have a filmmaker and a writer, you can make a little YouTube video and you can reach not a few thousand, but hundreds of thousands of people in no time. Yeah. And we are doing that.
Yeah.
We are writing explainers, explaining things. We are writing blogs, longer pieces for journalists, for high school students who need to write an essay about cows and climate or something. So we are doing that because we feel there is enough societal need and interest in the area that we research. Now we need to get it out into the real world.
So I'm going to put you on the spot. If I said, hey, there's 3 headlines or 3 bumper stickers that need to be out there on the environment and animals, what are some short statements that you give a lot of talks that resonate with people that Main Street America needs to hear on animals and environment? What would they be?
Well, the one thing is, I think it's really important that we communicate that agriculture can be an environmental challenge and even a problem if we decide to ignore things such as methane.
Yeah.
But if we take that beast by the horns and we manage, for example, methane, then we can really be a major driver of change in a positive way.
Yeah.
So we can turn a problem into part of a solution. And that is not some greenwashing. For example, if you ignore methane and you just put it into the air, it's a potent greenhouse gas that will warm our planet.
Yep.
And to a high degree. But if you manage methane, then you destroy more than is replenished.
And you said today, I heard you say, reducing methane reduces...
Warming. Reducing methane reduces warming. That's a bumper sticker there.
Yep.
Now, first of all, farmers need to understand that this is not a topic they must fear, but it's a topic they must take seriously.
Yeah.
And that's a difference, okay? Yeah. It is only a topic they should fear if they ignore it, if they act as if it's not theirs.
Yeah.
But if they say, I own this, I own the management of my resources such that I want to reduce methane, then they can be part of a climate solution. And that is a big deal.
Yeah. I've said, as AI is to the tech industry, that's the next generation of as Alzheimer's is to human pharma, as electronic cars to the auto, sustainability to agriculture, animal agriculture. So how do we create a revolution by the farmers to see this as the next generation of opportunity, not I have to do it. It's regulated on me. You said today it has to be the carrot, not the stick. How do we do that, Frank?
I think one of the most important things is that we have to explain to the farming community that this topic is real. It's not just some changing weather also that we're dealing with. It is a changing climate.
Well, I want to stop on that because you said to me earlier, but we've spoken to lots of large audiences, you and I. There's people out there that say, yeah, this global warming thing, this temperature thing, you studied as much as anybody in animal agriculture. Tell me, what's your position on the climate right now?
Well, I have no doubt that climate is changing and that human activity is to be blamed for much of those changes. There's also a natural change of climate. But in addition to that, we now see a human-induced exaggeration of the problem, okay? And that is largely linked to the burning of fossil fuels, which are oil, coal, and gas. The more of that stuff we burn with fossil fuels, hadn't been stored in the ground for hundreds of millions of years.
Yeah.
We are burning that. We're putting it into the atmosphere within a short time period.
Yeah.
By doing so, we are generating more carbon emissions, and that drives temperature changes.
Yeah.
But on the animal agricultural side, while it's not CO2, carbon dioxide, that's causing the issue, it is methane.
Yeah.
And that methane is really nothing other than energy if you think about it. If you heat your home with gas, or if you use gas to cook your meals, that's natural gas, that's methane, okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that in itself is not a problem unless you just off-gas that into the air all by itself. If you utilize it by making it into a utility, then it's not a problem but an asset. So if we, for example, use a feed additive to reduce enteric methane, which is the methane belched out by animals, then more of the energy the animal eats can be converted into product, into milk or meat.
Yeah.
Unless it's just lost to the environment.
Yeah.
That's a good change.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you cover a lagoon where the manure is stored, then you prevent the gases that normally come off the animal manure, much of which is methane,
Great gas.
to go into the air.
Yeah.
We can now cap it. We can convert it into fuel and run vehicles with it.
Right.
We are doing this here in California at a large scale.
Right, right. Very high level, the California agenda, I've heard you speak on it. The goal by 2030 and your 4 levers that you pull to get to this. Because I think it makes everyone say, can we live in a farming environment where there's climate neutral farms? Is that possible? And maybe connect it to your California agenda that you've helped lead.
So the answer is yes, it is possible. And here's how it's possible.
Climate neutral farming is possible.
Climate neutral farming is possible, and here's how.
Okay.
And I'm not saying this is the only recipe. This is one recipe, the one that we have deployed here in the state.
Yep.
So our legislature had devised the most aggressive of all methane goals in the world, which is to reduce methane by 40%, 40,
Yep.
by the year 2030.
Yeah.
So that's 6 years from now.
Yeah.
And that is
And it
super
started
ambitious.
when? When did that start?
It started 7 years ago.
Okay, yep. Okay.
So we must reduce 40% methane below 2013 thresholds. So the baseline is 2013, okay? The goal is to reduce 7.2 million metric tons of that gas, 7.2. So we started this 7 years ago, and of the 7.2 that we must achieve, we have already reduced half. So I just learned today that what I thought was true was not true, that it was more. It was 3.5 million metric tons that have already been reduced largely through manure technologies, okay? So
the levers are what?
The
Just
4
kinda
levers.
the 4 levers are.
So the 4 levers are, first of all, we have increasing productivity. That means we need relatively fewer cows, and those shrinking herds are called attrition.
Attrition. Yep.
Attrition is one lever.
Which is really productivity, more productivity, less animals.
Right.
Yep.
The second one is alternative manure management practices. So these are things like screw presses and manure screens and so on.
Gotcha, yep.
Separating the solid from the liquid.
Yep.
That's a second lever. The third one is anaerobic digesters. Here in California, we call them covered lagoons, where you cover the biogas, you convert it into either fuel for vehicles, or you make it into power for residential homes.
Yeah.
And the fourth lever is feed additives.
Yeah.
So these 4 tools, attrition, alternative manure management practices, anaerobic digesters, and feed additives will reduce more than 40% of what we need to do.
Yeah.
And that is by 2030, and that is sensational.
Yeah.
That is sensational.
It is.
And what's even more important is that the reason why this works, the reason why our farmers were able to do it, is because we worked with and not against the farmers. Our legislature put out a voluntary incentive-based approach, which means the state works even financially with farmers to reduce emissions. As opposed to many other places in the world where they take the big stick out and say, you reduce emissions, and if you don't, we'll fine you, or we tax you.
Yeah, because I got to say, as an innovator in this space, I have seen, we've had innovation that's been very effective in food safety, removing E. coli from beef. We've had a protein for mastitis and to replace antibiotics. And they haven't been used. They're actually on the shelf. I have 2 technologies on the shelf that are effective because there wasn't a value creation sustainable enough for the farmer. Is, these 4 levers, and I'll take even feed additives that we're working on, how do we assure that they don't stay on the shelf and they get used? How are you seeing that in California, even across this country?
So what we have done here is we, the university, and other partner universities, have worked with the legislature to inform our policymakers, first of all, of what's possible, of what fact-based information is driving practices in the state, and what that can result in. And our legislature listened.
Yeah.
I'm really encouraged by that. California is often criticized by other states, you know that, right? As being too regulated and so on. But there's an example of the legislature in this state really working to work with the farming sector.
Does that lead to the incentives you're talking about, or is this beyond the incentives? Is this more policy to get them economic gain?
It's both.
Okay.
It's both. We have a cap and trade market in the state of California that has led to us having different kinds of, for example, low carbon fuel standard credits and other credits that farmers can get, and it's that additional check that they can get. They are not just selling milk now, they're also selling their carbon credits.
Do you think some might critique that and say, yeah, but that's California, that's not Wisconsin or New York or whatever? I mean, we don't have these incentives. I think you and I agree incentives are key to catalyze this change, but you start to see this inset market create. How important is that, Frank?
I think it's critically important. It's not one or the other. It's all of these different approaches together that will cause a real shift of the needle. Okay, that's critically important. Because without these mechanisms, these reductions will not occur. I've seen it in many places throughout the world, but there I don't see the same effectiveness that I'm seeing here.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to be a little critical and say, here we set. I'm in an animal health company. I got biases. You're leading research and communications in the environment. You've got biases to make things work. Give me proof points this can really happen. Can really climate neutral farming happen? Can the cow be the how? Can farmers really get a second check economically and sustainably in 2030? Can all this really happen? I don't believe you because you 2 are biased. Okay. What's your? We have a lot of critics. Right? Anytime you create change, you're going to have critics. What are the proof points you have to those that are the most critical against you?
So, as I said, the 40% reduction of methane, that would be astounding, okay? If we can
by
do
2030 in California.
Right. The 40% would have, by a long shot, gotten our dairy sector to be climate neutral. What we need to get to in order to be climate neutral is approximately 30% or so reduction of methane. Why does it get us to be climate neutral? Because when you strongly reduce methane, you strongly reduce warming, and you offset other things like nitrous oxide, CO2. So a strong reduction of methane gets you to be climate neutral. Now, can it be done? I told you 7.2 million metric tons is the goal. So far, we have achieved about half of that.
A little over 3 now.
Yes. And through feed additives and so on, we will get to the full amount. Now, we have done the modeling, life cycle assessments, and other model efforts to show that if we achieve the 40%, then not just have we gotten the dairy sector to be climate neutral, but we will be able to sell credits off to others. And or we can undo, so to say, some of our historical emissions and their impacts on warming. So it's a cool deal, no pun intended, to work with farmers and achieve these reductions. And to those people who are critical and say that can never happen, those numbers I already quoted are metered because people are selling gas and they are paid for it. These emissions are metered, okay? So this is not somebody sitting in his office and making up numbers. This is certified by the state of California. These people are paid based on those emission reductions.
It's really good. Okay, so you just went to the critics. Now let's go to the dairy farmer. I'm 3 generations in the dairy business. I remember my great-grandfather and my grandfather, heads down, they're about the cows, they're about the land, they're about the milk, they're proud of the product they produce. They're not about PR and communications. Right. Now, a lot's changed in the last 20 years. There's a lot more communications going on, but how do we get the dairy industry to, one, believe, and two, become better advocates? Because you're maybe the best advocate we have for animals and the environment. Help me with speaking to the dairy farmer. What has to change if you're going to be in this dairy business beyond 2030?
So what has worked the best for me is transparency and honesty.
Yeah.
Standing in front of those farmers, I will not tell them what they want to hear. I will tell them what they need to hear.
I'll tell them what they need to hear, not what they want to hear.
Right. Yeah. And that's not always popular, but it builds trust. It builds trust. I explain the facts to them the best way I know, in ways they understand. That's number one. Super important, and many people forget that.
So how does that translate to a farmer? If you've got 100 dairy farmers that want a dairy to 2050, and it's the next generation, what must they do the last generation didn't do?
So with respect to greenhouse gases and climate, they must reduce, and particularly reduce methane gas, okay?
Yeah.
That's really critical.
Yeah.
But they must not forget that there's a whole world of other things at the same time.
Yeah.
So you cannot be myopic and only think methane.
Yeah.
You also have to think of other environmental and other issues.
Yeah.
And so we are doing that, and we are communicating with farmers sustainability issues one step at a time, in ways they understand.
Yeah.
We are training them. We help them develop even a business case on how to reduce nitrogen emissions, for example, or how to reduce carbon emissions, such as methane, and what that does to their operation.
So it's kind of it's table stakes in the future. Environmental, capabilities and reducing methane is a table stake if you're going to be in the dairy business the next 20 years.
I have no doubt.
Yeah, I think that's critical. And if you do it right, you gain economic gain from it, right? There's more sustainability economically. Yeah.
I'm not proud to say that, but over the last 6 months, I've visited 26 different countries, okay? And the reason why I visited...
How long?
26 different countries in the last half year.
Okay.
And these are countries like Uruguay, Colombia, Paraguay, New Zealand, Australia, Finland, Sweden, Scotland,
and what do you see? What's
And what I see in all these countries is the same thing. Farmers who want to understand what this whole thing is all about cows and climate, about what they are culprits of, about how that could be really changed, what they can do to change the picture. Not the narrative, but the real deal. What they can do to...
So there's not just curiosity, but there's interest to action.
There is a lot of desperation.
Okay.
Desperation, because people feel almost as being outcasts. Because a lot of the media reporting over the last few years internationally has put them into a spot where they feel they are accused of being one of the worst environmental hazards out there.
Yeah.
So first of all, they want to know, is this real? What is real? What are the issues that I'm accused of?
Yeah.
Once you break it down, they understand, first of all, this is a real issue that they need to pay attention to. And secondly, that it only is a problem if they look the other way, if they stick their heads in the sand. But they can turn that around. And many farmers do. And that gives them hope.
Yeah, it's good. And I see here in America and other countries more carrot than stick. There's getting to be now, right? There's the technology, there's the incentives, there's sustainable ways to do it. It seems like people are willingly wanting to do it. Okay.
But it's not like this all over the world. Yeah. I recently visited many European countries, and I have seen more tractors in a short visit than in years before because of protesting farmers. Farmers are distressed all over the world, and we cannot really afford that. We need them.
Right. And what's causing that movement in Europe right now is what?
What causes that movement in Europe is nitrogen and strong environmental
Explain
nitrogen.
Nitrogen mean the public's going against the farmer because of the nitrogen?
Because of each country in Europe having to reduce its reactive nitrogen emissions. Nitrogen is much more complicated than methane because it can change its form. From the urea a cow pees out, that urea nitrogen can become ammonia, the gas, or nitrous oxide, the greenhouse gas, the very strong greenhouse gas. But it can also become nitrate and leach into the groundwater, and so on. It's complicated, but they need to reduce nitrogen. And so there are now strong regulations. Countries like the Netherlands are telling their farmers, we are putting 25 billion euros on the table to buy out 1/3 of our dairy and swine farmers in the country.
Yeah.
And if you, the dairyman, sign the dotted line and you sell us your dairy, then you sign that you will never be a dairy farmer again, and neither will your kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now you tell a Dutch farmer that, and you'll have a real upset individual.
So what we have to do here in America, learning from that, is find the solutions. Get the path that California and other places have to, let's reduce 40%, get this thing to climate neutral, and we do it in a conducive way, because the world's saying we want more animal protein.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, I gotta ask, give me the moment, even recently, maybe it was South Africa, beyond South Africa, there's not many leaders today. They kind of say maybe it's 10 to 20% maximum of leaders today that are void of political correctness, that have the courage to take on the critics, to really lean in and make a change that'll last generations. That's what you're doing, Frank. What drives that? What stirs you? Because you create a lot of controversy by the positions you're taking. And I want to know what's behind that. What's driving you?
I have to say some of the greatest moments are those when you go to a meeting and somebody comes to you, 70, 75 years old, a farmer with these really worked up hands, and he shakes your hand in that very, very strong way, and he thanks you from the bottom of his heart. And he thanks you for the work that you've done of helping them understand what issues are and how to overcome them. That to me is incredibly powerful, and it's motivating me so much. And another moment is when I get my student evaluations back. I teach classes here with 400 undergraduate students. When I get those student evaluations back, they tell me what these lectures did to them. Of course, I teach them the standard stuff, but then I also talk to them about contentious issues and so on. And I can't tell you how many of them were turned on to looking into sustainability. Their lives were changed because of it. And that to me is just invigorating.
Well, I'm thankful to you, because I still remember sitting at Cornell with Dave Cole, now Virginia Tech, but his influence on my life, he'd be on my Mount Rushmore or whatever leaders, right? You're doing that. I don't know which one of that, leader inside there that your class that may be driving the next generation of change. So that's really, really powerful. Maybe transition just a minute or two on Bovaer. If we could just spend a couple minutes. So you've spent how many years? And give me just the very simple, what have you learned from this compound in all of your research?
So I first became aware of it maybe 4 or so years ago. I was fascinated by the fact that it stays in the digestive canal. It stays in the canal connecting the mouth to the anus. It's not going into the rest of the animal's body. It's a molecule that has an instantaneous effect. So you feed it on Monday. If you don't feed it on Tuesday, there's nothing left on Wednesday, and no impact. So it only works if you feed it.
And the benefits of that is, you got to feed it, but you don't have the...
Right. You don't have some lingering effects or so. It's instantaneous. And it enters the cow and exits the cow. If you want to have a continuous effect, you have to continue feeding it. But I think that's more of an advantage than a disadvantage for sure. It is a what we call methane inhibitor, so it disrupts one of those enzymatic steps in the formation of methane. And it does so very effectively. To my knowledge, it is one of the most effective ways of reducing enteric methane. particularly considering that it doesn't have the unintended consequences that you can get with some other compounds you feed that are also methane inhibitors. Okay, so it has that methane impact, but no other impact that I know of. But some of the other products can have unintended consequences. And so what I find really exciting about it is it does the job it's supposed to do and nothing else.
Yeah, that's good. And practical for a farmer? If you think about, you've run research and fed it to cows, and I mean, how practical is it?
Well, we're here at the University Dairy. We feed, of course, alfalfa and cotton seeds and almond hulls and citrus pulp. But in addition to that, we feed minerals and vitamins and so on, and put that into what's called the TMR, the total mixed ration. So it's absolutely routine for us to put,
blended into the feed, and
vitamin E or something else in, and Bovaer is not different.
Accepted by the cow, and
there are no known palatability issues or so where the cow doesn't want it, where it doesn't taste good or so.
Anything as you think about applying that technology to the industry, what's critical to the success of the product?
Well, if you ask the farmers what's critical is, of course, it has to do the job over the long time, so the persistency has to be there. And secondly, it has to be something that also makes economic sense. So if it were too expensive, people would hesitate. So it has to make sense in every aspect, and the bottom line, of course, is not different. So there must be a way of paying for it. In other words.
I'm curious a little bit. We're sitting at a table. I like to always say, part of the reason I like to share a table is I think tables can be one of the most influential moments, places, kind of almost a holy place. You eat, you drink, you have board meetings, you have family tables. COVID, I think, taught us the power of playing games with the family. Tell me about a couple influential tables in your life.
I think the most influential table is the one in my parents' house. They live in a former village school in Germany.
Where in
years
Germany?
Old. It's right in the center, in the heart of Germany, where the brother Grimm wrote all their fairy tales. It's quite picturesque there, it really is. On the other side of the street is an 800-year-old church, and my parents live in this former village school. My father used to be a teacher, and so it's kind of interesting. They bought that village school, remodeled it, and I love to sit at that dinner table, particularly with my father. My father unfortunately passed away a few years ago, but he was really, I would say he was a wise man, And so in his 80s, he sat with me around the dinner table, just like you and I are sitting here, and we had a glass of beer, and he said to me, Frank, what's really important is that you do good things and talk about them. And I thought, that sounds so simple. Do good things and talk about them. What did he mean? Well, he meant just that. I mean, don't be showing off, but do good, influential things, have an impact, and communicate it effectively. That's what he meant. And that is really what I've taken away from my father, and that's what's guiding my life.
Wow. What's next for Frank?
What's next for me is that I hope to increase my sustainability in furthering my academic family, Training Ph.D. students, training master and undergraduate students in sustainability, because we need a whole lot more people who understand this sphere, who help our farmers do what's right, improving, optimizing sustainability from animal agriculture. And we can only do it with the agricultural sector, never against it. And getting that mindset instilled in that young generation is really what I'm after.
I came into the Elanco office many years ago, and this young generation, 20-year-olds, they had this little thing going, cameras set up a little bit like we are, and they said, hey, you got to write with a marker somewhere on your body, or we'll help you. And we're going to take a picture in 1 or 2 words. What's your why? And it took me a while. I actually walked away and said, I'll be back in an hour. I'm not going to give you an hour, Frank. And I wrote on my arm, hungry. I remember the Brazil situation. I never want to, hungry faces stir me. Now it's probably not hungry, but wrong food. Young 9-year-old and under that don't get protein or whatever. But I also love hungry leaders because somebody chasing something is one of the greatest feelings ever. If I handed you a pen, what would those words be and why?
Well, the most important aspect of my life is trust. Okay, and trust is really guiding me. Building trust, keeping trust, not promising something I can't keep. I think this is one of the biggest challenges these days, that people try to make a quick buck and they promise everything, not being sure whether they can keep it.
Yeah.
So, for example, when I deal with business leaders, I tell them, you might be CEO of a big company right now, and I understand you have stakeholders and so on, who you need to make happy. But don't promise something you can't keep. How often do I hear people saying, oh, our industry will be, and then comes the word, carbon neutral, net zero, this and that and the other by whatever year. I think it's good that they have aggressive goals, but I hope that they also have milestones to follow up whether they can live up to them. And that they do not promise something that they cannot keep. Because once you breach that trust, you lose that trust. Wow. It's a bear to get it back.
Powerful, powerful. So trust it is.
Trust it is for me.
That's good. Maybe just a minute on that. Those consumer product good companies, will they come? Are they part of this movement? Do you believe there's, some people saying, will they step in? Will they lean in? Is it branding of their food? Will they pay the money to be part of this value chain? What do you think?
I think there are some, and I have seen some examples, but I also think there are many who just use it as lip service. And that's a problem, because if you have people who breach that trust that I talked about earlier, that consumer trust, then the consumers say, look, I've been lied to before. What are the odds I will be lied to again? And so we have to also within an industry tell each other, look, are you sure about that?
Right.
And if you're not sure about it, can you probably not make that promise?
Yeah. My belief is environment could be the greatest thing to shorten our supply chain. In terms of the ability to have these big, even European global food companies get much closer to the farm.
Yeah.
And I think the environment, and they're going to be surprised what they see on the farm, because you and I know the farmer is an environmentalist. It's an animal well-being. They love the land, they love the animals, and I think they love the product that they produce. And I actually think it will be the shortening of the supply chain. What do you think?
Well, I think the greatest challenge is that many of our farmers are very private people.
Yes, that's true.
They are proud of what they do, but they are not good talking about it. Yeah. And they are timid to showing people what they do. They need to stop that, because that's their business and people want to know. I have experience, now I'm taking students not just to our university facilities to teach them all the husbandry practices, but I take them to commercial farms and ranches, because I want them to meet farmers. And when these farmers are surrounded by these young 20-year-olds asking all these questions, I see them blossoming, I see them opening up, and I see such great conversations. And both sides, the farmers and the students, tell me this is some of the best experience in years. Our farmers need to step up to that, because the people who consume their products are more and more often interested in how they are being produced. How is that produced?
Yeah, that's good.
And then the farmers, who are the subject matter experts, need to say how it's produced.
And they can do that.
And they can do it.
I walk into your house and see 3 pictures behind your desk. Outside of family and your dad and others, the 3 most influential people in your life, who are they?
The 3 most influential people in my life. My doctoral advisor is certainly one of them, John Mitloehner from Texas Tech University. He has really helped me develop my subject matter and
passion around the environment.
My passion.
Okay.
Then it's my father, and another one is my aunt. She unfortunately was locked away in East Germany her whole life, because just by random chance she was on the wrong side of what became the Berlin Wall, and then lived with her husband for 50 years in East Berlin. Wow. And one day she took me by the hand and we walked So I was able to visit her coming from the West, but she was never able to leave East Berlin because it was communist. And so we walked across East Berlin and across a bridge spanning the River Spree. And so she was in her 70s. And all of a sudden she leaned over that bridge and she spat in the water. And I looked at her and I said, Auntie, what are you doing here? Because a 70-year-old woman spitting into the river, that was unusual for me. She said, you know what, Frank? I'm spitting into this river because I can. But this is the only river I will ever spit into. And I want you to promise me that every time in the future you go to a new place, travel a new country or so, and you go to a river, a lake, an ocean, you spit into it, and then you think of the freedom you have and what it's worth.
Wow.
And I've never forgotten it. And the world has seen me spitting. I have been spitting.
Wow.
And I'm very happy to have that freedom, and I cherish it.
Wow, so good. Okay, fast fire. Your favorite food?
My favorite food must be a ribeye steak, because my 9-year-old boy and I, we barbecue it, and I see that little guy salivating next to that barbecue, and that is just such a powerful experience. I love it.
So good. I jump in your car. If we just came over, what's the music you play most of the time?
I play music from the 70s most of the time.
Okay.
And both my 7 and 9-year-old kids, they love that too. So we listen to America and Chicago and the Eagles and so on.
Personal, kind of the goal this year on a personal level, some new activity, some new challenge. What's keeping you young, Frank?
Well, coming out of this COVID mess, I definitely haven't moved enough. And so I will ramp up what I used to do a lot of, which is hiking. We have some beautiful mountains around here. I normally go hiking 3 times a week. I need to do that again.
Okay. The movie you'd play over and over again, if you only had one?
It's a movie that most people in the US will not know. It's called The Life of Others.
The Life of Others.
It's a movie about a couple in East Berlin toward the end of the East German kind of dictatorship. That is a movie that once you watch it, you'll cry and you'll cry again and again and cherish what you have. It is a very powerful movie, The Life of Others.
Wow. The final message, what is it? What do you want to be heard right now?
I am super optimistic about our future. I think that we have a unique opportunity to live a more sustainable future. And we here at the university can help make that happen. I'm very proud of the work that we do together with industry. And when I say industry, I mean those people producing that food we all consume, okay?
Yeah.
I am so proud working with these farmers of improving their sustainability, the welfare of their animals, the livelihood that these farmers have. And that collaboration is extremely important to us. It's also very important for me to have that policy impact that we do have with people in Sacramento or in Washington or with the FAO in Rome. That is really important to us because we want to have that impact.
Frank Mitloehner, thank you for doing what you do to so many. You've done to me, which is open. They kind of say, without vision, you perish. There's a lot of people that are chasing this opportunity in animals and animal agriculture today that probably we didn't even know 20 years ago that could be the greatest thing the next 50 years, and that's environmental sustainability through animals and animal health and animal agriculture. Thank you. It's great to share a glass of milk and be at a shared table with you and sharing a conversation. Thank you.
Pleasure's mine.